Hi, Bradley. It's Bradley J here, and welcome to the broadcast. 2 in a row. Today we're going to talk Van Halen, and we're with Michal Christopher, who has a book, The Eruption and The Aftershock. Whoa, everything's backwards on here. Van Halen. Hello, Michal.
How you doing, Bradley?
We're going to get to the book right away, but I want to know about you. You've been in this city rocking for a long time, kind of parallel to me. We don't hang out, but you know all the people.
We haven't really crossed paths at all.
You know all the people I know.
I do. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's like we run in these circles, but we never. It's like a Venn diagram, but we never connect.
You know David Bieber.
No David Bieber. No Doug Sherman. No Michael Marotta.
Yeah, Michael Marotta is. Talk about Michael Marotta and Vanyaland, because that's important. You're a music writer, and that's one of your. That's one of the places you wrote. You also wrote The Phoenix. Why don't you give me a brief synopsis of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I moved up here from Philadelphia a little over a decade ago, and I started writing for The Phoenix. And unfortunately, The Phoenix went out of business, went down. But Michael Marotta, the music editor there, he decided to launch Vanyaland in 2013. And I was one of the founding writers of Vanyaland, and that place is just going stronger and stronger every year. It's one of the, I think, the premier places to get information in Boston and nationally, basically.
About music.
Yeah, about music. We've expanded into comedy, movies.
So it's cultural.
Sort of everything about culture. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I use StreamYard, by the way, as you know, and one of the great things about it is the comments come right into the app. You don't have to open an iteration of Facebook, for example, to see the comments. It's one of the nice things. And so, hi, Melinda. Melinda is one of my favorites. And Vanyaland took over kind of everything that the Phoenix was doing, or just some of the areas?
I'd say some of the areas, the most important ones. You know, when it comes to the culture and the scene in Boston and beyond, I think that's where Vanyaland is integral to what's going on, and it's such an amazing resource for everything.
So as a music writer, you have to write about what they tell you. Well, not always what they tell you. You have to write beyond what you love. What do you love?
You have to
what
make
do
it
you love?
compelling. You have to make it compelling, and if you're going to pitch something, it better be good. If you're going to pitch something, and even if it sounds like it's going to be good, but you can't deliver on it, it's not going to work.
In the background, I see some of your what must be your core bands. The Cult, is that right in your wheelhouse?
Cult's back there. Yeah, I've got Iggy and the Stooges. Of course, I have to have Van Halen with the book now. But yeah, it's a small sampling.
You have to have Van Halen with the book now. That is kind of damned with faint praise. You know, it's like, well, I wrote the book, I got to put it up there. It doesn't sound like Van Halen was in your wheelhouse. Not that matters.
No, Van Halen was definitely in the wheelhouse.
All right.
I mean, these things didn't just get shipped to me when the book came out. I mean, they've been kicking around for a while. But yeah, I mean, I love Van Halen, love Depeche Mode, which, as you know, I did a book on them. There's nothing behind me of theirs right now. I keep that in my vinyl room. But yeah, you have to. I feel like if you're going to be a music journalist, you have to be. You have to have your fingers in a lot of different musical genres.
When you pitch something, when you write a book about something, you need an angle. We talked about this earlier. I'd like to write a book about my experiences, but there's no angle. There's no unifying theme. You need to come up with an angle to pitch it, to have it be published, and to have it be successful. What was your angle with this Van Halen book?
Well, the one thing that it wasn't about, and I knew that this would be coming out right around the anniversary of Eddie Van Halen's passing. And there's a bunch of other books that are coming out. There's a photo book. There's a book that has all these interviews he did with Guitar World. And they all came out around the same time. And what I wanted to make clear was this isn't a book about Eddie. It's not about one period. It's the story of Van Halen, the band. And it crystallizes both primary eras of the group. And I think if you look at the cover, you know, right off the bat, it lets you know that it's all encompassing. It's got all the members that have been in the band, whether they were in it for a couple of years or where they were in it for decades. And I also wanted to bring in some other people to talk about their love of Van Halen. People like William Duvall from Alice in Chains, Phil Anselmo from Down and Pantera, Stephen Pearcy from Rat. These are all people that had been in the orbit of the Van Halen universe, whether by proxy or because they went on tour with them, played with them, and I wanted to see what they had to say about the influence of the band on them as they were coming up.
All right, we got into personnel there. Let's continue with that and talk about the original lineup. How did they kind of gel? How did they get together? Where did they come from?
Yeah, well, they were in Southern California, Pasadena, started as a backyard party band. And David Lee Roth basically was lending his PA out to Alex, Eddie, and Michael Anthony. And he finally sort of, I guess the best way to put it is he conned his way into the band or talked his way into the band. They didn't want anything to do with him. A few years prior, he had been rejected after failing numerous auditions with the band. But they finally said, look, this guy's wearing us down, and it'd be cheaper to get him in the band than to keep paying the rent his PA to use. And that's how it happened. They were never the best of friends, but sometimes that friction between the lead singer and everybody else creates some amazing music. And that's what happened with the original incarnation of Van Halen, I believe.
Do you think that great music was caused because of the friction or in spite of the friction?
No, I think it was because of the friction. I mean, you can't deny it.
Sounds good to say. Sounds good. Yeah.
You've got this friction where it's going to create some amazing music.
So if you're pals, you're not likely to create the excellent music.
No, you can definitely create some great music, but the bands that create it in spite of the friction, they don't last too long. And one of the bands that I'm thinking of, just because I went and saw one of the ex-members of it the other night, was Skid Row. I saw the Sebastian Bach the other night at Big Night Live in Boston, and the rest of Skid Row doesn't want him back. They never had a good relationship with him, and they made great music in spite of the friction, and they ended up breaking up, and now they want nothing to do with him, even though they could bring in millions touring with Sebastian Bach as the front man again.
Wasn't Sebastian Bach in Trailer Park Boys?
He was, yeah.
That was good. Yeah, that was probably his greatest moment.
He thinks that's one of the best feathers in his cap, so he'd agree with you.
All right. This is a little out of order, but that's okay. Melinda wants to know, did you meet Van Halen? I guess that means the band. Did you meet those guys? Yes, plural. Yeah, were they nice guys?
Over the years, I've either met or interviewed every member that's been in Van Halen, except for Wolfgang Van Halen, who is Eddie's son and was the last bass player that they had. Okay. But everybody else I've either talked to or met in person at least once or twice. And they all seemed great when I met them. I'll tell you what, Sammy Hagar was one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, because the guy just doesn't hold back and he's super, super nice. So yeah, met them all.
I guess we might as well get to that point. I don't know if I'm supposed to be honest, but when DLR was gone, I was kind of done.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were. I think when they brought in not only a new singer and the sort of that main front man that was he was the front man of the 80s, David Lee Roth. And they bring in this other guy. They bring in the Can't Drive 55 guy. The music gets more ballad-like, and it got a lot more keyboard heavy, which was a staple of the mid to late 80s. But Van Halen fans, a good majority of them, didn't want to hear that. And they went with Dave for a while. Sammy brought in a ton of fans as well. He had his own burgeoning solo career with I Can't Drive 55, Three Lock Box, those sorts of things. And it really worked to bring in a more mainstream crowd that Van Halen was just starting to bring in with songs like Jump and Panama and all that MTV video stuff that you saw in the mid 80s with David Lee Roth that just commandeered the channel. We're with Michal Christopher, great guy and author of, among other books, Van Halen, The Eruption and The Aftershock. Punk, Sex Pistols killed prog rock, but Van Halen type bands survived. So, of course, they're not prog rock, but what the heck are they? Are they metal? Are they hair? Are they hard rock? And what about them allowed them to survive where prog rock, where Rush, kind of that kind of thing, Rush, yes, petered out? I think that when Van Halen came onto the scene, there was a lot of so-called hard rock, or at the time, I don't know if heavy metal was really getting thrown around as much, that it was getting old. You had bands like Led Zeppelin that were falling off. They put out in Through the Outdoor, which wasn't well received by critics or fans. Any other hard rock bands, Black Sabbath, who actually took Van Halen out on their first tour of the UK, they put out Never Say Die, which was just skewered by the critics. And within a year or so after that, Ozzy was out of the band. So you had all these groups that were either in disarray or they'd sort of become bloated and full of themselves. And fans wanted something different. They wanted something fresh. And with Eddie Van Halen and his playing, you had something completely fresh. Nobody sounded like him. He didn't sound like, even though he was influenced by Clapton, he didn't sound anything like Clapton. He didn't sound like Hendrix. He brought this new sound, and that's what brought them to the masses and kept them going and made them fresh when everybody else was dying off.
What big breaks did they get? What were the milestones? There are a lot of bands, and probably they were lucky.
Well, having their first song be an already established hit with You Really Got Me by the Kinks and putting a completely different spin on it, that was a great break. I don't think that if they had put out Atomic Punk as their first single, that they would have done as well. That's not to say that Atomic Punk isn't a great song. It's a fantastic song. But they captured the listener's ears right away with You Really Got Me, because everyone's already familiar with it.
And they owned it. They did a great job. And, on the radio, on commercial radio, you have to play things a billion times. But and in the earlier days, we got to choose. And when it was time to play Van Halen, I would go for that because it was boom, right out of the gate. I love that. How about what about big breaks? Did somebody happen to see them, or how'd they get that? You Really Got Me out there. It's hard to get.
There's the old story that Gene Simmons discovered them and financed their first demo, which he did. And to Gene Simmons' credit, he allowed them to keep that demo when Kiss's management said, we don't like this band. The singer's not good enough. We don't think they're going to go anywhere. They were shopping that demo around. They were playing those clubs on the Los Angeles Sunset Strip. And they were discovered by Ted Templeman. He came and saw them, and he went and brought Mo Austin from Warner Brothers Records, and they were floored by Eddie's guitar playing, of course. Again, hadn't seen anything like it. And that's when they decided to sign them almost on the spot. And they were the ones that were promoting them and promoting the heck out of them, especially with the single, You Really Got Me.
They had a kind of adolescent vigor that was popular at the time. And it wouldn't fly now, would it? I mean, with the tour that has a name like the Hide Your Sheep tour.
Right.
That kind of thing, that was kind of a thing that wouldn't fly now.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is it's a product of that sort of cock rock era. The front man that's got the skin tight pants on. A lot of that just wouldn't fly today. And for its era, people ate it up. I mean, David Lee Roth was the guy that guys wanted to be and girls wanted to be with, that old age. But it's a thing where they really did appeal to the youth. We were talking about You Really Got Me. One of the biggest breaks for Van Halen was that song appeared in the film Over the Edge. Was it Over the Edge or River's Edge? Whatever.
It's River's Edge, probably with what's his name, Dennis Hopper.
No, I think it was Over the Edge. It was one with, I think Keanu Reeves was in it. And that movie had a phenomenal soundtrack. Ramones were on there. And that showed people that they were in line with this new group of artists. It wasn't something tired and old. You weren't seeing them on a soundtrack with the Eagles. They were on a soundtrack with the Ramones. I mean, this is the band that's going to be vital for the next decade.
It couldn't happen without David Lee Roth, right? He was bigger than life. He had a sense of humor. He didn't take it all too seriously. It was a big joke. And like you say, guys wanted to be him because it was like, wow, man, this guy's just having fun and making money at it. And I'm going to live that way vicariously through him. Like, I don't know if he started with Sammy Hagar, if they would have made it, because he's no David Lee Roth. Sorry, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, as great as Sammy is, and as great as he's a great singer, where David Lee Roth isn't a traditionally great singer, he made every show feel like a party. If he brought Van Halen into town, he was His big saying was he was the toastmaster of the immoral majority. I mean, people were eating things like that up, these little catchphrases he came up with. Look at all the people here tonight, live in front of your naked, steaming eyes. When you went to a city like Boston, and then you went to somewhere in the Midwest, they didn't know that he was saying the same spiel every show. But the people were eating it up, and he made it look like it was a big party, and they were having just as good a time as the audience was.
Now, as far as the aftershock goes, I mean, I don't want to give everything away in the book, but there's a curve, there's an evolution, and nothing lasts forever. Did the band start to peter out, or did the genre start to peter out?
You mean after Sammy Hagar came into the band?
Yeah, after he kept them afloat very well for a long time, and then gradually things tapered off. Did the times change, or did the band change?
They held on a lot longer than some of the other bands of that era. I think they had more staying power when the whole grunge thing hit. They were still having #1 records with Sammy Hagar, but I think that there started to be some friction again in the band, where with Sammy they were getting along. It was a happy marriage when he first joined. It really started to fall apart in the early '90s, and then they just started dropping off. So that was where they were making music that was in spite of their friction, and then it just completely went to hell when Sammy either got kicked out or left on his own accord. Depends on which story you believe. And then they bring in Gary Sharon, which was just the death knell to them in the mid '90s. I mean, nobody wanted to see that. Extreme were already finished, and to bring in him as a replacement for Sammy Hagar and not David Lee Roth, bringing him back, it was going to fail. There was no way that was going to survive.
One thing that was good for them is that David Lee Roth was a made for MTV type of guy, correct?
Yeah, right.
The timing was right on that.
Absolutely. I mean, those videos that they did when everyone else was doing $1 million videos and $2 million videos, they put out a video that only cost a couple hundred or a few $1,000s and jump, and it becomes just as popular as everything else on the channel at the time. And then they go out and put something like Hot for Teacher, which is this character-driven snapshot of the band, and it also does phenomenal. I mean, everything that they were doing from that 1984 record on MTV was turning to gold.
Hot for Teacher is probably my favorite song to play. It has that really smoking intro, and doesn't it have a cold ending, I think?
No, that is the one that kind of it drags out for a little bit at the end. It sort of does that.
All right.
And
I love the intro.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal intro because it catches you right away. When those drums, you just.
I like the talking in the beginning. I kind of like also remember Twisted Sister. I want to rock, and they have that conversation in the beginning.
Yep.
Hey, earache my eye, kind of thing. What do you want with your life? I like that kind of thing. Well, congratulations. This is, to write a book is a big deal. I mean,
yeah,
I'm curious about how hard it is to write a book. I mean, the first time you wrote a book, it wasn't your idea. A publisher contacted you, or an agent contacted you and said, hey, do you want to write a Depeche Mode book? And you did that. This one was more on your own, right?
Yeah, this one was a lot more on my own. I pitched it. I've been doing little sketches of this book as the years went on because, like I said, I'd interviewed the guys, and a lot of, when you do interviews, sometimes you don't use everything in it. And I had a lot of this stuff just sitting around, and I'm thinking, I'd love to just do a book on Van Halen. I think it's a great story. It's one of the classic soap operas in the history of music. And it's a compelling drama as well as it is about this band that had multi-platinum albums. But it came a lot easier to write this book. I think, especially with, and unfortunate as it is, with Eddie Van Halen's passing, this book had an end point. Whereas the Depeche Mode is still a touring, recording entity. Van Halen essentially died when Eddie Van Halen did. As sad as that is to say, it's the truth. You can't replace that member of the group.
Where can people see what you write? You still in Vinyland?
Still doing some stuff for Vinyland. Now that I'm not doing a book anymore, you're going to see me a lot more places. If you go to my website, thechroniclesofmc.com, that's sort of a repository for everything that I'm doing right now, whether it's doing interviews like this or we're doing different articles. I write for Ultimate Classic Rock. I still have a newspaper column that runs weekly in the Philadelphia area. So I'm a little bit all over the place.
You've interviewed a lot of people, probably.
I have.
Okay. Anybody you particularly liked? A couple people, and anybody that was kind of a disappointment? And yes, you can name names. You don't have to say. We all do.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll tell you, my disappointment was Gene Simmons. He was just, why bother? It was sad. How about you?
I think my biggest disappointment was Jerry Cantrell from
Really?
Talent Chains. And the reason why was it was at the time that we did the interview. It was right after Lane Staley had died, and Jerry was promoting his solo record. And it was a very short period of time after Lane died and Jerry was doing this. He was not in a good place at all. And it just was, he was in a bad state. And I've met him since then, and I've had great conversations with him. But when we had that first interview, it just went really bad. I mean, anything that I was saying, he was just argumentative about, and, it didn't go well.
How often do you get to interview the people in person?
I'd say at this point, it's probably half and half. Because back in the days before the internet, if you were interviewing somebody, they wanted to be promoting what was coming to town. Unless you were with a radio station and they were going to come into the studio and talk about things.
Yeah.
If you were doing print, they wanted to see those articles in the days or weeks leading up to the show that they were going to be playing. Now, if you have something like Vinyland, and a band is only 2 or 3 dates into their tour, if we catch them, we do an in-person interview, do it before the show, after the show, then that's still going to promote the rest of their tour, wherever they're going to be going after that.
I like doing them in person. I don't know about you, but one of the reasons to be in radio is to interview people. And the reason to do that is to meet them.
Yeah.
Well, I want to meet them and I want to find out. I want to get I want to learn a little bit about how they got famous and what makes them tick. And it's just so much easier to do. It's much more fun in person, huh?
Right, because you never know who's on the other end of a phone. And now you see a lot of artists doing things like StreamYard or Zoom or whatever, because they have this different way to interact with interviewers or whoever they're talking with. And it's still not as good as being in person, but it's a lot better than just being on the other end of the phone and you don't know what they're doing. They don't know what you're doing. It makes it more personal when you can do something like this.
We're going to do another interview at some point. Don't want it to be too soon because we don't want the fans to burn out on Michal Christopher. But we're going to do Depeche Mode, which is a band that I really, 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 really relate to. Violator, listen to it. I used to go on driving trips out west and just play it over and over and over back on a cassette when they had cassettes. Yeah. And I think was that way back then? If maybe it was a CD, I can't remember. And Personal Jesus, actually, that video with the Western theme and that sepia tone grain, that motivated me to do my first traveling and go out west. I just needed to go out west and kind of do what they were doing. I loved it so much. It was one of those things that was magic. The whole was more than the sum of its parts. So we'll talk about Depeche Mode at some time in the pretty near future, okay?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
So once again, Michal Christopher is the author of this baby right here, Van Halen, The Eruption and The Aftershock. It looks good. It feels good. It reads well. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Bradley. I appreciate it.
Everybody share this. Will you do me a favor and share it? It helps everybody. It helps me. Helps Michal. I'm sure it'll help you in some way. Take care now and bye, Michal.